It's the most famous aria Puccini ever wrote. A melody so beautiful, it brings audiences to tears. But behind its soaring notes hides a devastating truth. What if I told you that this aria, sung by the world's greatest voices, was born not just from Puccini's genius, but from his obsession with pain, death, and the darkest corners of love? Today, we uncover the heartbreaking reality behind the music you thought you knew.
It's one of the most triumphant pieces of music ever composed. An anthem of victory that has filled stadiums and concert halls across the globe. For millions of people, it's the sound of pure hope, the ultimate declaration that you are about to win. But the incredible power of Nessun Dorma wasn't born from triumph. It came from a place of deep, personal darkness, a real-life tragedy of false accusations, public shame, and the suicide of an innocent young woman that would haunt its composer, Giacomo Puccini, for the rest of his days. This is the story of how one of history's most beloved anthems is tangled up in a devastating scandal, and how the beautiful music we think we know hides a much darker reality. To really get the darkness, you first have to understand the light. Ever since Luciano Pavarotti's legendary performance at the 1990 FIFA World Cup, Nessun Dorma has become something much bigger than opera. It's a global phenomenon, a piece of music that feels like it belongs to everyone. It's the soundtrack to last-minute goals, championship titles, and moments where the whole world seems to celebrate together. The climax of the aria, that final earth-shattering cry of vincerò, which means "I will win," feels like pure confidence. It sounds inevitable. It's the voice of a hero who knows victory is guaranteed, a story of love conquering everything. But that popular idea, the one that fills us with so much joy, is based on a complete misunderstanding of the aria and the tormented world it came from. The hero isn't celebrating a victory he's already won. He's making a desperate gamble in the middle of the night, surrounded by the threat of death, and at the mercy of a ruthless princess. And the man who wrote it was living through his own private nightmare. By the early 20th century, Giacomo Puccini was, for all intents and purposes, the most successful opera composer on the planet. His works like La Bohème, Tosca, and Madama Butterfly had made him a superstar. A man whose melodies captured millions of hearts and made him incredibly rich. He lived in a gorgeous villa in Torre del Lago, a Tuscan lakeside town that should have been an artist's paradise. But behind the stunning success, Puccini's life was anything but perfect. His marriage to Elvira Gimignani was famously stormy. Puccini was a serial cheater, but Elvira's jealousy was a destructive force all on its own, a constant source of bitter fights in their home. It was a perfect storm of passion, suspicion, and resentment. And in 1909, that storm would finally break, destroying an innocent life and casting a long, dark shadow over Puccini's. Her name was Doria Manfredi. She was a young woman from the village, only 23 years old, who was hired to work as a maid in the Puccini house. By all accounts, she was a quiet, sensitive girl who deeply admired the great composer she worked for. But in the toxic air of the Villa Puccini, that admiration was about to be twisted into something ugly. Consumed by a violent jealousy, Elvira Puccini became convinced that Doria was having an affair with her husband. There was no proof, just suspicion. But for Elvira, that was more than enough. She began a ruthless campaign of public harassment against the young maid. She screamed accusations at her in the street, calling her a whore in front of the entire village. She even threatened to drown her in the lake. For months, Doria suffered this public persecution, her reputation destroyed by the wife of a famous man. Humiliated, alone, and with no way to defend her own honor against such a powerful accuser, Doria Manfredi saw no way out. On January 23, 1909, she swallowed poison tablets. It wasn't a quick or peaceful death. It took 3 agonizing days for her to die. The tragedy shocked the small community of Torre del Lago. Doria's family, refusing to believe the horrible things Elvira had said about their daughter, demanded justice. They insisted on an autopsy. The results were devastating and turned a local tragedy into a national scandal. The doctors determined that Doria Manfredi was a virgin. Elvira Puccini's accusations had been completely baseless. The public torment, the psychological torture, the slow, painful death, it was all for nothing. Doria was innocent. The Manfredi family sued Elvira for slander and persecution. She was found guilty and sentenced to more than 5 months in prison. To avoid the ultimate humiliation of his wife being jailed, Giacomo Puccini stepped in. He paid a large sum, 12,000 lire, to the Manfredi family to convince them to drop the charges. The case was settled, but the damage was done. The scandal left a deep, permanent scar on Puccini. He was a man haunted by guilt, knowing that the poison in his own home had led directly to the death of an innocent girl. The idyllic life at Torre del Lago was shattered. Years later, as Puccini began to work on his final, most ambitious opera, Turandot, the ghost of Doria Manfredi seemed to find her way into the music. The opera is set in a mythical ancient China and tells the story of a cold, cruel princess named Turandot who executes any suitor who can't answer her 3 riddles. It's a dark, brutal world, a long way from the romantic streets of La Bohème. While composing, Puccini famously hit a creative wall. He was struggling with the story until he and his writers created a new character, one who wasn't in the original tale, a young slave girl named Liu. Liu is fiercely devoted to the hero Callas. When she's captured and tortured by Princess Turandot to reveal Calaf's name, she refuses to betray him. To protect his secret and escape her tormentors, Liu grabs a dagger and kills herself. A gentle, loyal servant girl, falsely persecuted by a powerful woman who chooses suicide over dishonor. The parallels to Doria Manfredi's fate are so striking that many scholars and historians believe that in creating Liu, Puccini was trying to give Doria the dignity in art that she was denied in life. It's a heartbreaking tribute to the young woman whose death haunted him. And, in a final tragic irony, the very last notes Puccini ever composed before his own death were for the scene of Liu's funeral. It is inside this dark, violent, and emotionally tangled opera that we finally get to Nessun Dorma, and its real meaning is far more grim than its modern reputation lets on. The title translates to "None shall sleep." But this isn't just poetry. It is a terrifying royal order. After the hero Calaf correctly answers Turandot's 3 riddles, she still refuses to marry him. So he gives her a challenge of his own. If she can discover his name by dawn, he will agree to be executed. In response, the princess issues a chilling decree that no one in the city of Peking will sleep. On pain of death, they must find the stranger's name. The threat hangs over everyone. If the name isn't found, the whole city will be held accountable. So, when Calaf sings Nessun Dorma, he's singing in a city held hostage. His famous cry of "Vincero" isn't a simple song of triumph. It's a defiant, high-stakes bet against a bloodthirsty tyrant, a desperate claim of hope while standing on a knife's edge. It's a moment of unbearable tension, not assured victory. There's one final layer to this tragic story. While writing Turandot, an opera so deeply obsessed with death, Puccini was facing his own. A lifelong smoker, he was diagnosed with aggressive throat cancer in 1924. He raced against time, desperate to finish his masterpiece, pouring what little energy he had left into the story of the ice princess and the slave girl who dies for love. Before he left for an experimental radiation treatment in Brussels, he told the conductor Arturo Toscanini, "Don't let my Turandot die." He never finished it. Giacomo Puccini died from a heart attack following complications from his cancer treatment on November 29, 1924. The opera was left incomplete, ending right after the tragic suicide of Liu. The triumphant love duet he had planned was never written. The stories behind great works of art are often just as complex and emotional as the art itself. They can challenge what we think we know and invite us to see and hear things in a totally new way. If you find these hidden histories as fascinating as we do, consider subscribing for more stories that change how we experience the masterpieces we thought we knew. So when we listen to Nessun Dorma now, what do we hear? The triumphant melody is still there. The power of that final Vincerò is still undeniable. But it's impossible to hear it as just a simple anthem of victory anymore. Instead, you can hear the echoes of a much darker story. You can hear the grim reality of Turandot, an opera about cruelty and sacrifice. You can hear the personal pain of its composer, a man grappling with his own end. And maybe most clearly, you can hear the faint, tragic whisper of Doria Manfredi, the innocent maid whose devastating suicide is immortalized in the character of Liu, the opera's true bleeding heart. The next time you hear those soaring notes, remember that the triumphant sound we know as a global anthem of hope was born from a world of scandal, guilt, and profound tragedy. It's not just the sound of winning, it's the sound of a man trying to find one final redeeming note in the middle of overwhelming darkness.
And so, as Puccini's music fades into silence, we are left with more than just a beautiful aria. We are left with the weight of sacrifice, the cry of a soul torn between love and death. This was Puccini's gift, to make us feel the unbearable, and yet crave it again. His most famous aria is not just music. It is a mirror of life's fragility, and a reminder that behind every note lies a story of human suffering and transcendent beauty. If this journey moved you, don't let it end here. Explore more of opera's most powerful stories. Subscribe to Opera Brownn and continue the journey through passion, tragedy, and the timeless power of music.